Hey there, super friends. This is Joey with Last Point Gaming. Today is still Wednesday, January 3rd, 2018. I just had to pause there. Still Wednesday. If you want to connect with us on social media, you can friend up our Last Point Gaming Facebook account. You can follow us on Twitter at Last Point Gaming. You can follow me personally on Twitter at Stranger Sparrow, or you can always reach out directly with an email to lastpointgaming@gmail.com. If you're looking to subscribe to get notifications when we upload new content for this podcast as well as future productions, you can follow or subscribe to our YouTube channel, Last Point Gaming. So, this morning seems like a very long time ago. This has been one of the longest days of my life. Not only first day back to work after not working an 8-hour day for 2 weeks, because last week, the 2 days I was in, I only put in half days. But also technical difficulties prevented me from being able to accomplish things, and that just makes it all drag out longer. But this morning I got through the weekend gaming report, though it was a little late. I didn't really talk about my matches. But talked about neat new game store. Me and Boo visited. Well, not really new. They've been in the area for a while, but we finally got to visit and talked about some of our future plans. If you have any recommendations for recording studio equipment, such as cams or mics, or you definitely need this software, or whatever else, feel free to drop me a comment on YouTube, shoot me an email, tweet at me, DM me. Don't DM the Last Point Gaming Facebook account. You can. It just may be a while until I see it. I did put out on Twitter, on both accounts, looking for recommendations. Couple very upright young men, being Mr. Vance and Tybalt. Yeah, he was the one who was Tybalt. As well as one of my followers on Twitter that is not one of my locals. They all signal boosted me, asking for other content creators like in their circle to put in input, and that was really awesome of them. Mr. Vance even tagged a bunch of content creators he knew, and I will say these people were all great. All like, yeah, this is the webcam I use, and either I love it or it's definitely a budget option, but if you're looking for a budget option, and here's what I've heard about different mics, here's the mic I use. Oh, it was all awesome. And honestly, I just got my tachometer and my speedometer mixed up for a second, and thought that my speed suddenly dropped hardcore and got really scared. Okay, moving right along. No, I think it's awesome when creators help creators. We're not looking to do anything professional. Husband and I both have very stable jobs that it would take a lot. We would have to blow up in a really big way for me to leave that stability for either one of us to. But this is more of a for funsies thing, but I figured we'll put some effort into it. Really try to make something decent quality. And if we get enough followers and subscribers and whatnot, and at any point start monetizing it, likely any proceeds from that will go into either equipment or games or event fees if we start doing coverage at events. I don't know where this is gonna go. This is a fun and exciting adventure, I guess, for us. But again, we're not looking at this of, okay, and in 2 weeks we will have 100,000 subscribers and make $150K a year off of Patreon. That's not really the end game here. So I don't want to spend a ton of money. Like, I prefer to outfit the entire studio, everything we want, including like the walling kind of stuff we want. I think we're going to do pegboard. Our basement was all framed out when we bought the house, but it was never finished. So we also don't really want to put everything into finishing it because we wouldn't be turning it into livable space or anything. But, at least the gaming area we want, looking a bit nicer and whatnot, especially if we're going to be putting it on camera. And we thought pegboard would be the most cost-effective way while also giving, just a good variety in shelving configuration and that kind of thing. It's not like, well, we put this shelf up, and when we first put it up, it seemed like a great idea, but as we moved stuff around... Dude, go around me. God, what are you doing? As we moved stuff around and, relocated and whatever. What is going on? Why are people driving stupid? We decided that the shelf no longer works there, but, we put holes in drywall or whatever. With pegboard, it's just so much easier to be like, oh, this shelf needs to go up a foot? Cool. Bam. Done. So in addition to, like, recording equipment and, we'll need to put together a rig that can handle all the video editing and whatnot. I have the software, just, again, Leah is a little bit old, and I don't know how much, like, video editing she can handle. I mean, she's having a kind of rough time trying to run OBS in the background of Xmage or MTGO or anything like that. Like, she kind of runs one thing at a time. So I'd prefer something with a little more power, a little better graphics, a little better sound, just higher quality components. Not that the components in Leah weren't quality at one time. They were, but computers, man, they get outdated quick. Anyway, so that's probably going to be a big chunk of the cost, is getting a decent rig down there. And then, again, equipment and some window dressing, so to speak, for the area to make it look a bit nicer and whatnot. But got some awesome recommendations. If you have any for me, feel free to hit me up. I would love to hear, like, anything is welcome, even if you're like, well, I mean, my videos aren't super high quality, but this is the stuff I use. That, maybe if we're in a position where it's like, well, okay, we can suffer the quality a little bit in the beginning to kind of get a feel for what we're doing and everything, and then kind of improve from there. But all that said, yeah, that's all I got there. I think I talked about it this morning, that we're looking to do kind of instructional kind of stuff and board games, and like, would be nice once we actually figure out the Fallout game to have Epidemic come over, because 2-player board games, most of them, it's just not terribly entertaining to watch only 2 players. But have him come over and do gameplay recording, as well as magic stuff and whatnot. So, moving right along to Rivals of Ixalan spoilers. Whew. More spoilers came out today. I haven't seen all of them, unfortunately. I've seen a few that, like, I got to kind of briefly see the card. Like, there's the black card, 1 and 2 black. Everything get Ascend, and if you meet the requirements for Ascend, you get the city's blessing. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. unless you have the city's blessing, and then it's only opponent's creatures. Which, being that both players can end up with the city's blessing, I think. I don't know. I really got to read up on how that thing's going to work. I think it's great that it says opponents not, creatures not controlled by somebody with city's blessing. So that seems like a decent low-end board wipe. I think that may actually, well, see, I don't know. Like, personally, I'm a big fan of the Fiery Cannonade, unless pirates get to be more of a thing, and then that loses some functionality. But for the most part, that has been a really good two toughness board wipe for me. Though, of course, this one, you could, depower their creature some. I didn't see if it was an instant or a sorcery, but I'm gonna bet sorcery. I feel like they've still been trying to underpower standard, to the point that I would be really surprised if that was an instant. It'd be great if it was an instant, because again, then, it can be a nice combat trick for, oh, you're attacking me with, some big fatties, let's just shrink them down a little bit. Especially the amount of creatures with uneven power and toughness. You can get off some kills that will greatly reduce the amount of power coming in at you. I don't know, I'll have to take a look. Unfortunately, despite not being able to get much productive done today, it was a kind of busy day trying to get my computer to cooperate. So, talked about the Vampire Lord and the Merfolk Lord. Talked about the kind of lackluster 4-drop vampire that, Oh, and then there's the, Admiral's Command, Admiral's Call, whatever, counterspell, 1 and 2 blue, counter target spell, raid. If you attack this turn, it only costs a blue. People are talking a lot of smack on that counterspell, and now I'd still prefer to have negate. Okay, so being that the raid trigger reduces the cost, yeah, I hear you that for a blue, you are likely only ever going to be countering an instant. Unless you're countering your own spells for some reason. I don't think Storm's in the deck. Or in the format, but so yeah, I can see the argument for negate, but 1 and 2 blue is kind of the standard cost for a blanket counterspell. So, in whichever situation, either a creature or non-creature spell, yeah, I can see saying, well, I'd rather have Essence Scatter for creatures and negate for not creatures because they're cheaper. But there is something to be said for having a counterspell that can hit any kind of spell and just straight up counter. Not this, Spell Pierce or Metallic Rebuke or what's the other one? Supreme Will. Where it's counter unless your opponent pays whatever. Even Supreme Will always costs 3. And they have an exit clause. Now it only has 1 blue in the casting cost, so that makes it slightly easier to cast. Metallic Rebuke, you can get the cost down a little bit because it has the improvise. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's decent. I don't think it's going to be like a $20 card at any point in its lifetime, but I think for standard it's a fair and decent counterspell. But I'm not a blue player. So I'm going to put that out there, that my analysis of blue counter magic-y cards is just not great. Just because I don't play them very much. So I look at that card and I say, it's a fine counterspell. More competitive blue control players may look at that card and go, no, that's garbage. Whatever. Not my bag, so. Let's see here. What else has been spoiled? There's the horse. What does it get? 2+1/+1 counters? With the Ascend trigger. There's also, I think it's a new red card. I know, this is pretty bad. I don't remember card names. I barely remember card types. But I think it's a new red creature that's like 3 for a 1/2, but the raid trigger is he gets like a +1/+1 counter or something. Here's the thing about raid cards. I do not ever recommend putting raid cards in a deck that aren't at least okay. You know, it's like I talk about, I have Harsh Mentor in the main of my Rami Red deck. There are decks that it does absolutely nothing against as far as the secondary ability. But it is a 2/2 bear for 2. It's not great if I'm not pinging them for activating or forcing them to deal with it before they activate. But if that is the case, 2/2 for 2 isn't terrible. It's squarely mediocre. Raid cards that are bad without the raid trigger, don't put them in your deck. Now, this is going off of my anecdotal experience. Back when raid was in Khans of Tarkir, there was the Wingmate Rock. It was like a 3/4 bird flyer for 5. But with a raid trigger that if you had already attacked when you cast it, you got 2 birds instead of 1. So, I think maybe it was a 3/2. Maybe it wasn't a 3/4. Because that almost sounds worth 5 mana on its own. I think it was a 3/2. So if you raided it, you ended up with 6 power and 4 toughness on the board on 2 different bodies, both flying. Pretty good. If you didn't raid it, it was awful. Like, that is way too much for a bird. And I could never raid that thing. I just could never make it happen. And I'm sure then you're supposed to, like, hold it until you get to raid it or some trash like that. I don't know. But, yeah. Definitely do not recommend playing raid cards that aren't okay, at least, without the raid trigger. Like, Raider's Wake, I actually really like that card. I do kind of want to build a curse deck, I'm not going to lie. That with Trespasser's Curse, and then a bunch of hand disruption, just seems great. Because it's every time they discard, they lose 2 life. So you duress them and actually get a hit, they lose 2 life. Also, man, that would be fantastic against blue-white Drakehaven. Or you're like, Baha! Behold my Drakehaven. You're like, Baha! Behold my Raider's Wake. Your Drakes attack you as they enter the battlefield. What you gonna do now? Because even without, like, the raid trigger is great because it plays into itself. Where it's like, oh, you have no discard spells? That's cool. You can just, make them discard because you attacked. That was one of my favorite things in Ixalan Draft, was to get the Blight Keepers and Raider's Wake. Oh, and just, like, stock up Blight Keepers in your hand. Till you get the Raider's Wake down, or till the turn before you're going to get the Raider's Wake down. And just lay out 3 of them. Next turn, attack with all 3. And they're like, it's alright. They're only 1/1s. And then you're like, Raider's Wake. And they're like, oh crap. Personally, I'm a big fan of that card. But that's really not pertinent here. The new Minotaur Planeswalker, I am really disappointed. I was so excited for him to be in the actual set. And, you know, looking at the Planeswalker deck version, he's almost constructed playable. That I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. And then they spoiled him. And I was like, this is kind of awful. 5 mana for Planeswalker that comes out with 4 loyalty counters is already kind of meh. His +1's not bad. It's basically force your opponent to Thoughtseize themselves. Discard a card and lose 2 life. Well, and it's all opponents, so that's going to be great in Two-Headed Giant. His -3, I think it is kind of lackluster. Where it's like, okay, you get to active treason a creature. Alright. And then if it's 3 or less converted mana cost, bear in mind, he costs 5. So by that point in the game, unless you're swinging for the win, this ability is barely relevant, especially as it's going to knock him down to 1 loyalty. Therefore, you know, basically you just paid 5 mana for an active treason. But only if it's converted mana cost 3 or less, sacrifice it at the end of turn. And his ultimate, I think it's like -8 or some garbage like that. Each opponent loses life equal to the number of cards in their graveyard. Yeah, with Scavenger Grounds in the format, I look for that to not really be a thing. Yeah, just everything about this Planeswalker seems really meh. The new Watley almost seems better, but she seems kind of meh, too. I don't even remember everything about her. She just kind of was underwhelming. I do recommend going and checking out the Professor's exclusive preview card video for Rivals of Ixalan. It's very adorably done. I never watched Mad Men, but I think that's what it's supposed to be a parody of. But I'm not 100% sure there. But yeah, it's a really adorable video. I do recommend checking it out. Why are we stopping? The light is green. So, yeah, man. I ran out of spoilers to talk about quick. I'll have to look them up more and talk a little more in depth about them tomorrow. Or Friday. Then as far as Modern Action, I have finally assembled my Vile Humans deck. Vile spelled V-I-A-L. Just because the colors kind of shift in that deck. As far as like what's a splash and what's... It's the Humans deck that works off of Aether Vial and only runs green and white lands. My build is a little bit different, and that's probably going to be the first video published to the YouTube channel. I'm going to try to do a gameplay video of it on X-Mage, because I think I finally got all the kinks worked out. Downloaded the latest version of X-Mage, which allowed me to play an entire match without getting kicked from the server. Yay! That was exciting. When Rivals hits MTGO, if I can get OBS set up with MTGO, because I'm having some difficulty there. I'm not sure what... Like, OBS can't find it. I'm not getting, like, the screen preview I get with X-Mage, so I don't know if I did something wrong. I may have to go back and watch the tutorial again. Once Rivals hits MTGO, I may do a couple drafts of that. Just because I'm not really willing to buy into singles on MTGO at this point. For many, many reasons. Don't attribute this to the fairly recent, I guess, issue that happened with a player receiving a lifetime ban and having his entire digital collection seized. It's not really that I'm worried about. It's, I don't know, I just don't play MTGO enough. And the thing is I would feel kind of bad about it, except I play a lot of paper Magic and spend a lot of money on paper Magic. And because they don't give me any benefit an MTGO for that. Yeah, I'm gonna play Paper Magic and do my online testing and whatnot with things like X-Mage, because that's what makes sense to me. Because I more play Paper Magic because I like the community at my shop, than because, you know, I want to play competitively or anything like that. So that's where that's at. Probably most of my gameplay videos will be through X-Mage. What else do I got for today? Not really much. One thing, I am almost home. I'm personally, like, really excited about the possibility of us actually doing some video recording, which is what, like, the dream with Last Point Starter was. If you haven't been around that long, you haven't heard my spiel, I started doing the podcast because when talking to husband about how we were going to do things for the channel, he was like, yeah, I think your voice is better than mine, so for all the voiceover stuff and everything and any kind of narration or anything like that, you should probably do all that. And that made me think that I should probably work on my public speaking a little bit. Just don't get me wrong, the Driving Rants podcast here, it's very unrefined. It's very throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. But that's why I started doing it. That it was practice to, like, work on not saying and not having dead pauses and all that kind of happy stuff, and work on my voice projection and all that. So to actually be kind of in the planning stages for making the video content a reality is super exciting to me. But luckily for you all, because I ran out of stuff to talk about 10 minutes ago, I'm home. So, yep, as always, if you made it this far with me, thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow night.